covered a lot of ground. We've talked about the very beginning of Revelation, and that is to say the introduction, about apocalyptic literature. And my brother Ralph challenged me, had a great point that I want to bring up. He sent me a text and said, just out of the blue, no, apocalyptic literature does live on, or post-apocalyptic literature does, like with zombies and so forth, and all kinds of war things post-war. Yeah. And I totally forgot that in modern language that's true, and I usually do say that, so I'm glad he reminded me that, in case, particularly the people who listen to this via podcast. Apocalyptic today is used when discussing certain literary types or genre type, and it's different. It is very different from the way scholars use the term. So today, if a movie is called post-apocalyptic, it means after some great war, like after World War III, or it's a zombie apocalypse. A zombie apocalypse. You hear that sometimes. That means when it's a dystopian society, when people are killing each other over water, it's Mad Max in the Thunderdome. That's an apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic genre. Have you heard that before in movies? That is not at all what scholars mean by the word apocalyptic. This has to do with particularly an ancient form where, as I've described in your handouts as well, where a person receives a divine message from God, either by God or God's emissary, an angel, and either goes on a journey and or receives a vision of what's going on in the heavenly realms. And it's what's going on in the heavenly realms right now, and a lot of times, typically, a little bit of glimpse of what's going to happen in the future. So today, when that's used, it means after a big, bad war. And in fact, Ralph, this is the nerd in me, and I'm fine with that. Speaking of your hat, yes, okay, we have affinity. Star Trek hat. So the nerd in me, it bothered me for years when I hear that people say, oh, it's apocalyptic film. And I thought, no, it's not. That's not how the term is not, they're not using it correctly at all. So technically speaking, that word has now been hijacked by pagans, and that's not what they mean anymore. That's right. So very good question. So an apocalyptic literature, of which we are speaking, this is a good scholarly understanding of a type of what I just described. Okay, we talked about that. We talked about John's introduction, who John is, talking to real, actual people. And he's exiled on Patmos, a small, actual, literal, physical island that I have been to. I've been to the traditional cave in which he received his vision, traditionally speaking. But there's a real island called Patmos. You can go there too. This is not all mythic fairy tale. You can go there. John is recorded in several ancient patristic authors as really existing. He is an exile, it says, because of his word and the testimony. That is, probably because he's a Christian, probably a prominent prophet to the churches of Asia Minor. These are actual, literal people. And he goes there, and apparently at some point he gets in trouble, and he's kicked over to Patmos, and there he receives this vision. The initial vision is to the actual churches of Asia Minor, and he's correcting and or encouraging them, and he assumes that this letter will be passed around to all the churches. That's why, if you remember, Leonard, at the end of every time he speaks this oracle of judgment or encouragement, he says, let all the churches hear. So he's assuming everyone's going to eavesdrop on this message to them. Like, don't be like Laodiceans, or don't be like Philippians, or whomever. Don't be like them, or do be like them if they're doing well. After this intro, then he changes gears, and what we call the end of chapter 3. In John's Revelation, when he wrote it, it just ended the theme, and he picks right up to what now is, technically speaking, the apocalyptic section proper. So this is really where the apocalypse of John begins. So far, technically speaking, he has used apocalyptic images. Remember, Jesus is spoken of almost like an angel. Remember, he has bronze feet and so forth. His eyes are on fire. That's apocalyptic imagery. It's wildly symbolic and imagery of a Christophany. This idea that it's a Christ appearance. He's glorious. It all ties together, though. It all's going to smell the same. It's all very similar. But now he's about to really be revealed. That's the revelation, the apocalypse part, of what's happening in their world and what's to come. Before we do that, I want to do a couple things real briefly. Just remember, in one of the handouts I gave you, I talk about in apocalyptic literature, time is divided basically in two big parts. There's the present evil age, and then judgment day, and then the new world to come. In prophetic eschatology, the prophet's view, this age wasn't that evil. If I said stop doing it, repent, well, they could stop doing it. But in apocalyptic eschatology, an apocalyptic view of the end times, no. The world needs a bath. It's so corrupt that he's got to make a new world to come. So it's a present evil age, not a present age, a present evil age. And the Christian said it's not just the day of the Lord, Yom Adonai, that's Old Testament. It is that. But that day is when Christ returns. So they take an Old Testament concept, Day of the Lord, Yom Adonai, and they mix it with two events. The Day of the Lord is now the return of Christ himself to enact judgment. And the word they use the most for that is parousia. Remember that? Parousia, which means coming or arrival. They also can use the word revealing, at Christ revealing. Okay, those are two major views. Remember, before the end of time comes, before the day of the Lord comes, it's going to get worse and worse and worse until it happens, till Judgment Day happens. And that's why I said if you look on your chart, I drew some squiggly lines. It gets worse and worse and worse. And I said that worse and worse and worse, they have a word for that. They use metaphors for that. Remember? The birth pangs. It's when the pain, it hurts so badly right before Judgment Day happens. And usually, what they usually do is they'll talk about how it gets worse and worse and worse. It starts smaller, like internal strife and warfare, famine, earthquakes. It gets broader in scope. And then death, and then it gets cosmic. The moon turns to blood, the stars from the sky, and so forth and so on. It is my view that, as John does this in this book, when it gets bigger and bigger, I'm using my hands here, when it gets smaller scale, it affects fewer people, to more broad, cosmic, you're almost to the final shift of the ages. It's almost Judgment Day. And right when it gets to the very end, he's going to let you get to the very end. He's going to stop and then start all over again. It's going to get bigger, worse, worse, worse. He's going to do it again, then do it again. Remember I told you that over and over and over. So we're going to see today one of those visions of how it gets worse and worse and worse. I don't think we'll get that far enough to do it again, but we'll try to get through chapter 6. Before we do that, that's what I'm setting up as a reminder. The second thing I want to do is look at Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 6. There are two chapters that were very influential. I cannot overemphasize this fact. These were very influential in how Jews understood God's reign and his sovereignty, the images they use. If you're an ancient person, you do not know what a Congress is. You don't know what a Senate is, the way we understand it. You don't understand what a Republican democracy of the U.S. is. That's not, remember, a republic is when you vote for officials to make decisions for you. So we do not live in a democracy. We live in a republic. So in any case, they don't know it's the same kind of thing. They had one chief image of ruler, and it's monarch. And when you're a monarch, you have one person on the throne. That person has a council of, they call the council elders. These are their, as you might say in the U.S. terms, it's the monarch's cabinet. It's the chief political officers, the chief priests of the day, and their head leadership, the elders. So you have a monarch, and you have his elders. You might have a viceroy, someone that sits on the right side of the person. But that's what happened in the ancient world. So there's no notion at all that there's publicly elected officials. They don't even think that way. In most parts of the world, the Greeks were different for a while. Read Isaiah chapter 6, we have a perfect image of a monarch on his throne. I'm going to read it. It's a short chapter. This is, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up. Now by the way, I could spend a long time here, I won't, but I want you to understand this spatial imagery matters. And when a Jew wants to talk about God being, listen, not creature, but creator, and that, by the way, that's the stinking line in the sand. Jews do not worship creatures. A little footnote, I just did a podcast on Trinity. You understand that. That's why it's so adamant. They're so adamant in the early church, you can't say Jesus was created because he'd be a creature. Creatures can't save anybody. Creatures don't worship. They're not prayed to. Only that which creates. And so there's a massive, thick line of demarcation. There's not a blurry line. Well, he's semi-divine. Jews don't think that way. Richard Bauckham is exactly right. So he's high and lifted up, or from the highest realms, it's a way to say he's not creature. And the train of his robe filled the temple. It fills all. That's the idea in the ancient world, that he fills all the temple. That's his presence. By the way, they also perceived as the cosmos, what we would say cosmos, the whole earth is God's temple. That's like in Genesis, by the way, too. I think in Genesis 1, he's building a temple. That's cosmos. Verse 2, above him stood the seraphim. Each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and 2 he covered his feet, and 2 he flew. So these are his messengers, but he covers himself. I'm not going to unpack all that meaning because it's not about Isaiah tonight. And one called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is Yahweh of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. Glory literally means his gravitas, his fame or his light. Lord of hosts, Yahweh of hosts means like Yahweh of his armies, angel armies. But listen to these images. So you have these 6-winged creatures, and they're screaming, Holy, holy, holy. They're singing to him. And remember, holy means set aside and different. You're not a creature, you're creator. Verse 4, and the foundations of the threshold shook at the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke. That's the divine presence. Verse 5, and I said, woe is me, for I'm lost. I'm a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips, for my eyes have seen the King Yahweh of hosts. And then one of the seraphim flew to me, having his hand a burning coal they had taken with tongs from the altar. And that's the altar. There's the assumption that the altar is in before God himself, before Yahweh, there's an altar. Altar, everybody in the ancient world knows what an altar is. That's where you kill your animals. That's where the sacrifices take place. It's in the Holy of Holies. In the ancient world, they believe that, this is common, by the way, not just Jews. Jews, Egyptians, other Mediterranean people believe that when you get in front of the presence of divine, you had to be ritually pure. And one of the ways they made yourself ritually pure, depending on the literature you read, was they did some kind of ritualistic procedure. Some would dip oil on them. Some would dip different kind of ointments on them. Some would cleanse themselves. So here the idea is that he's touching his lips to make him ritually pure to be in the presence of divinity, of God himself. And I've heard all kinds of bad sermons on this one, but they're all bad. So the seraphim flew to him. He's got a burning coal straight from the altar. Verse 7, he touched my mouth and said, it has just touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away. Your sin is atoned for. That is, you are now ritually prepared to be in the presence of God. And the voice from Yahweh saying, whom shall I send and who will go for us? See, notice that now we can finally hear God because now he's ritually pure. Then he said, here I am, send me, send me. Like the kid in class who wants to give the answer. He said, go and say to his people, keep on hearing, and so forth. Okay, I'm paying attention to the throne room. Go to Ezekiel chapter 1. In Ezekiel 1, it's a long chapter. It's a good chapter, but I'm just reading some of this here. Verses 5 and following. He saw this image, and in their midst there came likeness of 4 living creatures. Their appearance, they had human likeness, but each had 4 faces. Each of them had 4 wings. He describes these creatures, these 4 living creatures, and their faces. And if you go all the way down, let's say down to verse 25. There came a voice from the expanse over their heads. They stood still. They let down their wings. And above the expanse over their heads, there was like the likeness of a throne, in appearance like sapphire. And seated above the likeness of a throne was a likeness with a human appearance. And upward from that of the appearance was a waist I saw was gleaming metal, like the appearance of fire, enclosed all around. And downward from what had appearance of his waist I saw, as it were, the appearance of fire. And there was brightness all around him, like the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud of the day of the rain. So a rainbow. So was the appearance of the brightness all around. So was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Yahweh. And when I saw it, I fell on my face, and I heard the voice of one speaking. So he sees basically rainbow all around the throne room, all over it. And little footnote, this is called a Merkabah Judaism. Merkabah, in Hebrew, means throne room. We call that Merkabah mysticism. And it's very common in rabbinic circles not to allow children to read these texts until they turn 18, or until the rabbi says you're willing to do it. They're convinced if you read it well enough that you're going to go into an ecstatic state from which you couldn't return. Just to have glimpses of the throne room. Yeah. And I just read it like it's nothing, Bless my heart. Yeah. Now let's go to Revelation chapter 4, and you will see why I've been talking about everything I've been talking about. So in Revelation chapter 4, we have some very common images. Chapter 4, verse 1. After this means it's a common way of saying then this happened. Remember, after this was the visions of the 7 churches. Okay? And behold, or look, a door standing open in heaven. And the first voice, which I had heard speaking to me like a trumpet, said, come up here, and I will show you what must soon take place after these things, or after this. Who's the first voice in John's vision? That's Jesus. You pretend this is church. That's right. So that was Jesus. So he's saying he hears the voice of Jesus, of the resurrected Jesus, saying, come up here, I will show you what take place. So here we have a shift. In apocalyptic literature, I just told you and reminded you a second ago, they either see a vision or they go on a journey. Here we have both. He had a vision for what we call 3 chapters. Now he's going to take a visionary experience journey. So he doesn't really go somewhere. He has a vision of that because of verse 2. He says this, and once I was in the Spirit. You just have to trust me unless we looked up every reference. In the Spirit, I was in the Spirit, is technical language when a prophet was saying I had a prophetic spirit. I was in the Spirit. It doesn't mean I received the Holy Spirit because I became a Christian. That's not what that means. It means I received a prophetic spirit, the ability to have a vision. And behold, a throne stood in heaven with one seated on the throne. And he who sat there had the appearance of jasper and carnelian. And around the throne was a rainbow that had the appearance of an emerald. Now, that should sound familiar because that was Ezekiel 1:27. So we have this beautiful picture, beautiful, huge throne, probably supposed to be huge. But notice he doesn't talk much about how high it is above the heavens, how big the throne room. That's different. That's a little weird. So the size isn't as important here. But now it's the picture of, it's like a rainbow. Now if you remember back in Genesis, the rainbow was given. Why? It was God's promise not to flood the earth, not to kill everybody again, or at least whatever. So here we have this image of mercy. Mercy. That is, so we have a massive throne, and what he sees surrounded are lights that remind him of mercy. Around the throne were 24 thrones, and seated on the thrones were 24 elders, clothed in white garments, with golden crowns on their heads. Now, people made a lot to do about these 24 thrones and 24 people. Some say it's 24 is 12 by 12. So like 12 tribes of Israel and 12 apostles, which is a way of saying the church and Judaism, God's faithful. That's one way. It's also quite possible that these represent the 24 priestly groups. If you go back to your Old Testament, there were 24 specific priestly groups. So these 24 elders could represent the priests before him. At the same time, because they're called elders, it was also commonplace for this to be considered like his counsel. You might say his divine counsel. Now, that might bug you because you go, wait a second, God doesn't need input from people. Well, okay, you can think that or say it all you want to. I didn't write the Bible. Well, all I know is it's very common in Judaism to make that. I'm telling you, if you want to, the standard, remember, they're speaking to people who understood certain things. And if you want to think someone is above everything, the chief person in charge, describe that person. An 8-year-old Jew, 8-year-old Egyptian would say, oh, it means Pharaoh. The person's on the throne. Well, who's with him? Well, his people who give him input, and he rules over everybody. He's got all these leaders he rules over. That's just standard fare. So this is just standard fare. So 24 either is just a particular number of Jew, Gentile, or just means something as generic as it's a group of elders. What I'm convinced, at minimum, it might be a group of priestly class, meaning these are leaders who function as priests. Now that's important because priests work in the divine presence. They have access to the divine realm, divine presence. I'm fine with that. At minimum, it means this is divine counsel. And that matters a little bit later on. I'm going to pick on Casting Crowns, the group, in just a second. I'm not there yet. So they're clothed in white garments with golden crowns on their heads. So they have white garments, of course, of purity, and can be royalty, but typically purity, with golden crowns. Guess what the word crown there means? The crown is it Stephanos or diadem? Or diadem. Yeah, it's a Stephanos crown, so these are victor crowns. Why? Because they're not, in that sense, they're not royalty. They're not royalty, that's right. So they have victor's crowns. From the throne came flashes of lightning and rumblings and peals of thunder. Again, that's just standard Old Testament vocabulary for God's presence. And before the throne were burning 7 torches of fire, and then he tells us what that means. Which are the 7 spirits of God? He means the Holy Spirit. It is represented like fire, but is the Holy Spirit. What we call the Holy Spirit. And verse 6, and before the throne there was as it were like a sea of glass, like crystal. You must understand, in the ancient world, particularly the Jews, everybody believed that before the gods, Egyptian, Mediterranean, Greek, Roman, and Jews, before the gods created, cosmos was chaotic, like unshaped Play-Doh. And the ancient people thought that gods created things when they either A, brought order to it, and or brought function to it. Those are real similar concepts. 3, or they named it. So ancient people did not think what we call ex nihilo, out of nothing. They didn't talk that way. So in Genesis 1, God created the heaven and the earth, and the Spirit of God hovered over the darkness of the waters. He hovered over the waters, and it was Abel, or you know the word Abel, Cain and Abel. It was void, it was empty, and without form. It means it had no function yet. So in the creation story of Genesis 1, he starts naming things and giving it function. I'll call that light and day. I'll make these luminaries over here and there. I'll make the vegetation do this. And of course, guess what Adam does when he's created? He starts naming the animals. He brings them order. He didn't create animals, but not to us. They were already there. He names them. But in the ancient world, that's like creating them. They don't have a use yet. They just don't have a use. It's the best analogy I think of is unshaped Play-Doh. It's a big old blob of something. Later on, they could speak of coming from nothing, like in the book of Hebrews and in Colossians. He brought from nothing. He'll say the words from nothing. But in Genesis, in the ancient world in general, chaos is what it was like in a primordial state. And one of the number one images ancient people used for chaos in a primordial state is water. Most people hated the ocean. They hated the seas. They died there all the time. The storm gods killed them all the time. And so when you sailed along the coast. Very seldom did you go from port to port if you were across the seas. Only if you had to. You took the long way around the edges. So you were never far from port because it was so dangerous. People died all the time. And there was common belief that, like the Loch Ness Monster, they had their monsters out there too. And also that other little footnote, the other place of chaos is the desert because nothing lives there. And that's where demons dwell and so forth. That's why it's not surprising at all to any ancient person that Jesus meets Satan in the desert or the wilderness. No one has a problem with that. Now, what does that have to do with anything I just said? In Revelation 4, he sees before the throne like it's glass, like it's crystal. How tumultuous is that water? Zero. How many ripples are in glass? None. The point is, this is the perfect image, if you're a Mediterranean ancient person, for God's sovereignty over creation. Sovereignty over, at minimum, the throne room. In his presence, all the chaos and the monsters and the scary things out there, zero. It's all gone. He has complete control. So if you're an ancient person, if you really want to hit the best image you can for God's mercy, you say it's like a rainbow beaming out of his throne. Well, David, is he really in control or is he kind of in control of all I'm about to experience? It's like this, Ralph. It's like a sea of glass. That's how calm it is where he's in control. There are no evil forces, nothing opposing him. There's nothing chaotic. That's important because he's about to talk about some tribulations in the rest of the document, but particularly in chapter 6 and 7, he's about to give a whole lot of hell on earth, and he's trying to encourage his audience at first. It's calm where he's at. He's on the throne. He's on the throne. It's like we do to our children. We say, I'm here with you. You're about to get some shots. I'm right here beside you. I'm right here beside you. I'm bigger than your shots. And we'll give you ice cream afterwards because your love's for sale. So these elders are there, and around the throne, verse 6, on each side of the throne are 4 living creatures. Remember, that's back to Ezekiel. 4 living creatures, full of eyes in the front and behind. That means they see, they're omniscient. That's probably means they see all around them. And the first living creature like a lion, the second living creature like an ox, the third living creature like the face of a man, and the fourth living creature like an eagle in flight. And the early church fathers used those 4 images to describe the Gospels. So it was commonplace in patristic literature to interpret the entire Gospel based on these images. So John was the lion, ox was Matthew, the face of a man was Luke, and the eagle was Mark. And they would have whole commentaries to a degree through that lens of those 4. And I could explain why, but I don't want to. Okay. Because of time. It doesn't. That's patristic. FYI. So I like to say we have these 4 living creatures who see all things, and they're like, again, they have a face like this. Now, it's probably to some degree you might say these are 4 creatures that represent all creatures that live. So before the throne are these creatures that represent all living creatures. But you'll notice, and you can break all this down, like the eagles in the air, the ox are working things, the lions are the wild animals, and the mans are the mans, humans. That one who looks like a man represents us. So domesticated animals, wild animals, birds of the air, and humans, that kind of, it probably represents all living creatures, are right before the throne. And the 4 living creatures, verse 8, each of them with 6 wings, are like the cherubim, right? And are full of eyes all around and within, all day and night they never cease to say. Now, these are what we might call cherubim, and these are a higher order of angels or spiritual beings. And they say exactly what we heard in Isaiah 6, verse 3, exactly the same thing. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. And then he adds this part. This is John's adding in Revelation. Who was and is to come. Who was and is to come. So he's the eternal one. They're singing all the time. Now who is singing all the time? These 4 living creatures. That is all. These who represent all creatures sing to him. You are not one of us. You're not a creature. You are a creator. And to prove the point, verse 9. And whenever the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to him who is seated on the throne, who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down before him who is seated on the throne and worship him who lives forever and ever. They cast their crowns before the throne, saying, Worthy are you, O Lord our God, to receive glory and honor and power. Why is this? For you created all things. By your will they existed and were created. So here we have an image of God on his throne being worshipped because he's creator. Again, we go, I get it, David, so what? But again, it should matter to us too, by the way. But certainly if you're an ancient Jew, there's only one creator. I wrote a song. I stole the lyric from Revelation 4:11, but I wrote a song based on 4:11. It's an a cappella song. I wrote it for a girls trio, but it's my version of what I think this might sound like.
You are worthy, worthy, our Lord and God, to receive glory and honor. For you created all things. For you created all things. For by your will they existed, and by your will they were created. They were created. You are worthy, worthy, Lord and God.
That existed.
That's right, by your will.
Nothing is by accident. It was intentional.
That's very good. It was intentional. That's exactly how we should take it. It's very important to understand that, because it's hard for us to understand until you've read other literature. But people did not talk this way in the ancient world. Creation came because either gods fought over each other, right? Remember called a theogony, that is a god war, or because there's a hierarchy of gods and different gods created certain things. They say no, God he wanted it. By your will they came out. Nothing compelled you. You didn't lose a battle. You didn't lose a bet. You just wanted to do it. We take that for granted because we grew up in a kind of quote-unquote Judeo-Christian. Of course God would have done that. That's the only kind of God we talk about. But when you're competing against views of God, that's a big deal. And he's worshipped because he's the creator. He's the only one who creates. He's
I
creator.
remember a story about.
Yeah, you're talking about Tiamat and Marduk. That's the
That's right.
yes, the Babylonian called Babylonian epic.
There is truth to there being tons of other gods
It's true that people around the world think there are many other gods.
back then, I guess.
Oh, the Babylonians had they had the idea that that's one of the early stories of how creation came about. That Marduk and Tiamat were fighting, and when Marduk beat up Tiamat, I think it was Tiamat, cut his body in half. The body became the heavens and the earth, and the blood became the ocean. That's one cosmogony or early Greek story. And then they also, and then it's called Enuma Elish, which means went on high, but that's it, the Enuma Elish. Inside the Enuma Elish is a story that sounds kind of like our Noah. There's a guy who's a flood story, but he's trying to give eternal life, and he gets granted that because he survives the flood and whatever. So it's true that other ancient people had stories about where the earth came from, but of course, and that story is a perfect example of that's different from here. There, the earth came about, creation, because of someone he lost in battle and leftovers. And it's an interesting question you have about, are there other gods? And I don't want to spend much time, but it'd be interesting. In the ancient world, Jews had no problem using the exact words for gods when they meant spiritual powers. They often use that word. In fact, even in the New Testament, sometimes that word is used, but it's translated differently. They'll say rulers. But oftentimes in the Greek, certainly in the Hebrew, it can mean, it's it's Elohim, gods. Let me give the conclusion. It's standard Old Testament scholarship that most Jews were not monotheist. I said that one time on a podcast. Someone got bothered by that because they weren't. That's why the prophets repeatedly had to tell them to stop worshiping all the other gods. They weren't. They were at best, most seem to have been what we call henotheists, which means there's a chief god and a pantheon. There's big dog, there's daddy, and then all little sidekicks. And like Baal, there's several different gods in the Canaanite pantheon. In fact, El was their chief god. That was the name they gave for Yahweh as well. So they seem to have some similarities to their neighbors. In fact, a lot, so much the prophets got really bothered by that. So did Moses. So a lot of people say, stop doing that. And that's why even that you shall have no other gods before me. Some scholars say, does that mean there are no other gods? Or does it mean just don't have them before me? It sure seems to me as the simplest reading is, they didn't say there's no other gods, they don't have them before me. Don't worship the other gods before you worship me, which means you owe me sole allegiance. And it's the sole allegiance that made it so weird. Like a Hindu today. I've got Hindu neighbors and great people. I say, worship Jesus alone. They go, well, why would I say alone? I'm more fine on the worship Jesus part. But why would I just pick out one God of all of them? And the ancient Canaanites were the same way. Ancient Israelites were the same way. And so the Jewish prophets over and over and over complained about that. So the average Jew on the street probably did worship a form of Yahwehism, but as the chief god, but liked to dabble in all of them all the time, and it bothered them. Now, after the Babylonian exile, let's say 6th century BC and onward, then most scholars say they became primarily a monotheistic culture. When they came back and Ezra and Nehemiah rebuilt the temple, and they really got all Judaized passion, then Jews seem to be pretty monotheistic. Before then, they seem to be struggling with their monotheism. That's not to say that the prophets didn't want them to be, or the priests didn't want them to be. They did. It's just that the average Jew in the street wasn't very monotheistic.
Plenty of time to think about it during the exile.
Had plenty of time to think about it in exile, yeah.
Rethink things.
Yeah, and remember in Ezra and Nehemiah, when they come back, they have a massive revival. They find the book of the law, and a massive revival breaks out. Mine's not a revival. And people wept, that's exactly right, and said, what do we got to do? And they said, well, stop worshiping the gods.
You're not saying there are.
Correct. What I said was, and what I'm saying is they believed that. Yeah, now, today, since about that time, Jews today would say there is only one God who exists. And certainly that's what Christians believe, and Jews believe, and Muslims believe. Only one God exists. I'm saying Hindus don't think that, and other God, but of course we would say they're mistaken, they're just wrong. Christians during the first century, Paul himself would not have had a problem. It seems to me when you read Ephesians carefully and Colossians, he would have no problem believing there are very, very powerful authority figures in the heavenly realms. He would have no problem saying that. He would still say, but they're not God. I push Paul and say, Paul, where'd they come from? He would say, well, God made them. I would say, well, Paul, are they corrupt? Paul would probably say, well, some are evil. So he'd probably say they chose to start doing evil. But today, that's a long time ago. Today, we don't really read those verses very, seriously. We tend not to adopt the same worldview. The average Christian doesn't believe there's a bunch of power. Paul sure did in Ephesians. Read Ephesians 6, spiritual armor. Our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against what? The rulers and authorities of this dark age. He really means that. He really means that. That's a good old Jewish mindset. There's God, and there's a bunch of other rulers who are fighting against him. And here in Revelation 4, there are rulers, but these rulers he talks about, at least, are all on his side. These are his divine council. But they are casting their crowns, not Christians, not humans. These elders are. And that's why, at least in Southern Baptist life, when I grew up, and I'm not a Southern Baptist, but which is fine, I'm just not, but growing up in Baptist churches, everyone said, that's what Revelation, that's what heaven will all be like. Because they all think, number one, not they, but the average Christian does, no matter what denomination. One, our whole goal is to be to heaven in a disembodied state, which is false. That's Platonism. That's Plato. No. Christians' goal, according to the New Testament, is to get a resurrected body. So that's the first big thing everyone believes that's wrong. Two, they think we'll be singing all the time. And that's why every single worship leader who loves all the attention says, we're made to worship. You and I were made to worship. As Chris Tomlin tells us, he's wrong. He's dead wrong. We weren't made to worship. Nowhere in the Bible does it say we're made to worship. Jesus never said that, nor did he imply it. If that's what we're made to do, then why are we doing anything else? Why are we eating food? Why do we pray? Why don't we just walk around and just worship all the time? Just getting ready for heaven. Well, that's nonsense. That's not all we do. Have you read Revelation? Yeah, I have. And certain creatures worship all the time. It never says that we do this all the time. That's not our destiny. Our destiny is not to sing all the time. It's cool in Revelation, every time someone talks, it's a song. That's cool for me because I like music. So that's the second big mistake. Third, we don't cast our crowns. Everyone says when we get to heaven, we're throwing all our crowns down because we get all of our. You get a crown, you make it, you get a big golden crown and a bunch of jewels. They're all bedazzled. But then you throw them down to heaven. That's not at all what Revelation says. It says the elders, this chief council, they have crowns because they rule to some degree. And the idea, of course, is that even these heavenly rulers, whoever they are, even they are submissive to the one who created. That's it. So this is not about us so far. We're not even represented. Besides the one who looks like a man. That's a human. It looks like a human. These creatures don't even seem to be human. They're creatures who represent things, maybe. And the cherubim, and they were these four-limbed creatures. So it's not us.
They were living in a vacuum.
They did worship other gods. Baal, they would go to the temples. That's why the prophets would say, stop doing it. That's why they would be led astray. It's a big deal. It's a big deal.
On every hill.
They built idols on every hill. They said, don't do it anymore. And so eventually the Jews finally drew a line in the sand to say, we only worship one God. And that's why they would be killed for it. You go to the book of Daniel. You go to the Maccabees. These people were tortured before they'd worship anybody else. That's the sign that you've gone all in with Judaism. You worship one God alone. But remember, in Judaism, this is where it's a blurry line. In Judaism, whatever you worship is like saying it exists. So that's why some people back in Deuteronomy 6 say, have no other gods before me. Some say, no, even that's an ancient form of monotheism. There's only one God that exists because they're told not to worship the other gods. To a Jew, it's the same thing. That's possible. I don't think so. I think they really do think these other rulers existed.
So what you're saying is the idea
Yeah.
that there's
Good question. If we were, I guess, repeat. So what I'm saying is that the average Jew, that's a big mouthful, I know, but it seems to be the case that the average Jew did not believe that only one God existed, at most, or at minimum, only worship one God, until about the 6th century BC, about the time they came back from Babylonian exile. Most scholars think Yahwehism, that is, there's one God who's at least the chief God, that might develop one particular tribe all the way back to Jethro. He's given two names. That's Moses' stepdad. Well, Moses flees from Egypt because he's a murderer, and he meets, remember Zipporah, who's also given another name. Whatever her dad's name is, he's probably from a particular tribe. I think it's the Kenites. I'm going by memory here. I think it's the Kenite tribe, which is around the Arabian Peninsula. Moses probably encounters Yahwehism from his father-in-law. Did I say stepdad? I meant father-in-law. I meant father-in-law, not stepdad, father-in-law. So it's Moses' father-in-law who probably introduces Moses historically speaking here, to Yahwehism. Even in the narrative, it seems to suggest that. Then Moses starts talking about one God, then he goes to Mount Sinai, and he meets the Ten Commandments. And we started this, Yahweh's, who do I say send him? You send I do. So historically speaking, even the concept that Yahweh is the chief God probably doesn't start until Moses meets Jethro, whatever his real name is. But then Jews took centuries, and they never picked up, because like Moses, he's newfangled. Everybody worships all the gods, even the Egyptians. Everybody did. And then finally, after Babylonian exiles, when they probably started really practicing what the prophets had been preaching, and the priests said, knock it off. And they said, no, okay, we got it. We're only worshiping one God. And that really changed things. Chapter 5 is almost a mirror of chapter 4. Notice the similarities. Then I saw in the right hand of him who was seated on the throne a scroll written within and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. It's in his right hand. Sorry, you gauche people, you left-handed people. Right hand's a sign of authority. He's got a scroll. This is probably supposed to be understood like a last will and testament. What's supposed to happen when I die? I want this to happen, then this happened, then I want my funeral to look like this, I want money to go here. This is God's last will and testament for the cosmos. And it has 7 seals because it's perfectly sealed. Remember in the ancient world, remember the scroll? You've seen Gladiator and whatever. They seal it up and they put candle wax on it and they dip it with a signet ring. And that signet ring was a special, usually your family crest or something like that. Or it might be the Star Trek symbol. But they would seal it. So it's perfectly sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel. Here's a strong, it's a big, eschaton in Greek means strong. He's a mighty strong angel. Proclaiming with a loud voice, a loud voice, who's worthy to open the scroll and break its seals? Notice, not who's strong enough, because he's strong. Who's worthy? That is, who's morally worthy to do it. Who can possibly open this? And no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look into it. Not a daggum soul anywhere, no creature could figure out what's in that last will and testament because they weren't worthy. And he doesn't handle that news well. Verse 4, he begins to weep loudly. He loses control because no one was found worthy to open the scroll or to look up into it. Because I want to know. How many of y'all are nosy? Okay, well, there you go. Verse 5, and one of the elders said to me, buck up, cowboy up. It's in the Greek, cowboy up. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. There we go, now we're talking. And the root of David, root means, of course, a descendant of David, has conquered. Has conquered. Guess what? Yes, it's the same word. He has conquered. Like Nike, so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals. So we know who this is now. The resurrected Jesus is the only one who's worthy to open up, listen, God the Father's last will and testament. And between the throne, so that's the opening scene, between the throne and the 4 living creatures, and among the elders, I saw a lamb standing, as though it had been slain. So it's a lamb picture, but like it had been killed. Of course, the crucifixion. With 7 horns. You love those horned lambs, don't you? Because horns represent authority and rulership. And this is in Jewish apocalyptic works, it's a common image, however bizarre this is to me. A lamb with horns is not a docile creature. It's a ruling image. So it is synonymous with a lion. Don't think docile, think ruler. Horns means ruling, and 7 means perfect leadership or complete. He has 7 eyes. That means, and eyes means knowledge. So he has all knowledge, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out to all the world. All the earth, rather. So he sees all his spirit goes out. That's why he has knowledge of all things that go on, because he has the spirit that goes out to all the earth. And he went and took the scroll from the right hand of him who was seated on the throne. And when he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each holding a harp. Boom, they bust out with a big old guitar. It's a contemporary service. And golden bowls full of incense, which everyone knows in the Mediterranean world it burns all day because it smells good, which are the prayers of the saints. So an image right before the throne of God in his exact direct presence, where monarchs had big bowls that burn incense that smelled good, just like we do today. It smells good. That's rich people have those things in the ancient world. The average person didn't smell pretty. Oil was perfume that was to smell pretty because you stunk so badly. Wealthy people had that. So this incense now metaphorically represents what goes up are the prayers of the saints, not Saint Jude and we're saints. In the New Testament, every Christian's a saint, the holy ones. Now, listen to the imagery there. Before the throne of God, bursting in rainbow of mercy, surrounded by a sea of glass with no chaos, and all these creatures are singing, Holy, holy, you're the creator, are the prayers. He's saying the prayers of the saints get directly to the throne. No middle ground, no middle person, directly. Now that's to encourage people because it encourages me, but it's also about to encourage his audience. It's about to say all hell's going to break loose. Just understand, when hell breaks loose and you pray, it's just like those, Jimmy, those big fat, you ever seen those big bowls that time in the temple? Yeah, it's like that. They're right before God and he hears those prayers. And of course they have harps. Verse 9, and they sang a new song. Notice before they sang a song in the throne room, chapter 4. Now in chapter 5, they're singing another song. You could parallel these, chapter 4 and chapter 5. Are you with me? I'm saying they're very, very similar. Yeah. Now they're singing a new song. Remember back in early on in Israelite history, when they get to the other side of the Red Sea, the Yam Suf, they sing a new song. That is just a song of victory. Something's changed inside them. Now they're singing a new song saying, worthy are you to take the scroll and to open its seals. For you were slain, and by your blood you ransom people for God. Ransom means you redeem them. You set them free from slavery. That's what when you ransom someone. Or if they were in a debt slavery, you paid off their debt. From every tribe and language and people and nation. That's not just Jews. That's for everybody. And you have made them a kingdom and priests to our God. Now that's almost straight from Exodus 19:6. And they shall reign on the earth. So what before was just for Jews, a kingdom of priests, now it's all people who follow the Lamb who has been slain. So it's not limited just to Jews anymore. Verse 11, then I looked, and I heard around the throne, the living creatures and the elders, the voice of many angels. So now there's a whole bunch of angels joining in the song now. The choir has gotten bigger. numbering myriads and myriads. That is really is kiliades and kiliadion. It's like millions and millions. It's probably the largest conceivable number they had in the ancient world. For them, they wouldn't say Google and Google. They didn't think that big. This is a Googleplex. Yeah, they wouldn't say that. They didn't have that number in the ancient world. This is almost certainly the largest conceivable, or one of the largest conceivable numbers they could even think of. It's that many. And of course, he says millions and millions and thousands of thousands, myriads and myriads and thousands of thousands. Saying with a loud voice, worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and wealth, or riches, and wisdom, and strength, or might is fine, and honor and glory and blessing. That is, he gets everything. So he's the one worthy because finally he can do it. Verse 13, and I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and in the sea and all that is in them saying, to him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be blessing and honor and glory and might forever and ever. So they all scream out in jubilation, at least one time, yay! He can open the scroll and we can finally see what God the Father's final will and testament is. And they're stinking happy. Very, very happy.
What is this about being under the earth?
Great question. So what is it, under the earth? Under the earth is where the dead lived. It's the abode of the dead, in a nutshell.
Oh, okay.
In a nutshell. Now, of course, we know where the imagery comes from because where do you bury people? Right, in the ground. They're under the earth. Yeah, that's a typical. And the four living creatures, these creatures that probably represent all creatures, they scream out, Amen. They were Texan. Amen. And the elders fell down and worshipped. Of course, Amen means like final say. Let it be. So we have two chapters, what we call chapters. Chapters 4 and 5 go together. We have a throne room scene of God the Father. Chapter 5, a throne room scene of God the Son, the Lamb. We have a throne room scene in chapter 4 where they sing to God the Father because he's worthy, because he's creator. Chapter 5, he's worthy because he's what? He's worthy to open up. He's worthy to open up the scroll, which is great. His blood ransomed all the people. So far in Revelation, a little footnote for the rest of the book of Revelation, the only people who get worshipped, if I can say people, the only persons who get worshipped on the throne is God the Father, and this horned lamb, of course, means Jesus, this image of Jesus, the only two. And if you're a Jew, one more time, you do not worship anybody besides what we would say deity. So, what's the purpose? Probably to comfort his readers who are about to hear of some bad news.
So when Jewish people...
Did Jews know what the horns meant? Probably so, because you can look up, and I can give you, Talbert's got 4, 5, 6 references in Jewish literature about the same time where they talked about a lamb with horns. And in Jewish literature, it's the Messiah.
Because when I hear it, it's like, that is just weird.
Yeah.
It's so strange.
That's right. So depending on your cultural background, they call it background knowledge. Background knowledge in the ancient world, yes, it would not sound so weird. If I said Elaine flew on Air Force One or something big, no one really thinks you're really flying. I might say the jet looked like that, which we can picture images. I mean, their house looked like Donald Trump lived there. It evokes images there. Oh, yeah, we get it. That's exactly right.
To a Jew, the word lamb would also evoke sacrifice.
It sure can. Yeah, the lamb who was slain. That's exactly right. But the horned image means rulership.
Authority.
Yes, ma'am. That's right. So lamb could certainly evoke sacrifice. I completely concur. So these two major chapters go together. They're very similar in structure. Chapter 6. Now I watched when the Lamb opened one of the 7 seals. Woo! Here we go. Let's see what happens. He breaks the first seal. Shkakunk. Now think of this image. It's a scroll. If you look up here for a second, it's been rolled around. There's a seal, then another wraparound seal, another wraparound seal, another. So there's. So as he pops open one seal, he's going to read it. Then he wants to pop up another one to read it. So he's undoing the onion layers, as it were. So,
Customary to write on both sides of the scroll.
is it customary to write on both sides of the scroll? The answer is yes, if it's typically for personal use. And there's different.
If you were a scribe,
They sure could. It's called a pastograph, which means the opposite of the hand, but that's what we call it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And if they reuse it, we call it a palimpsest. But they could write on both sides. If it were,
so to preserve the scriptures, say for example,
it was not a practice. Correct. It was not a practice if it were a sacred document to write on both sides.
okay, that was my question.
Correct.
I
Later on, they would do it. They later on would do it. But for personal use to save space because everything costs money, they write on both sides all they wanted. And again, and they could even, like I said, the Palam said, they could even scratch it out. There's no eraser. They got to scratch off and then rewrite it, or just write on top of it, around the edges. And we found some sacred texts that way, that it took to the 1960s, 70s, because now they could use infrared. They can do things in the laboratory to look past layers of ink to get to the original document, because they just wrote on top of it. So he opens one of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures say with a loud voice, it was a voice like thunder rather, "Come!" And I looked, and behold. So listen, he's coming to see a vision. Listen to this. Stay with the image here. I know I'm going slowly, but make sure you understand what's happening. As he undoes the seal, it's taking place. Remember, it puts into motion. It's a last will and testament. He's not just reading it. It's like when he pops it open and he can see inside it. It puts into motion an event within history.
Like a video?
Kind of like it's more like commanding officer says, "Now go do this." As I read it, it's live action. It puts into practice.
I picture it like a Disney movies or something. They'll have the books and they'll flip it over and then you see the story.
Yeah, like a Disney book, and you pop it open, and it's a 3D picture. It pops open.
And then it starts.
Sure. And imagine that's the real world. Or he could look in the scroll and he sees these events. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky. Let me say that one more time. Don't look at me kind of confused for a second. So when he undoes the seal, it's like a last will and testament. Okay, if I die, and in my last will and testament I say, on the 3rd day after post my death, I want my kids to receive $1,000. On year 27, I want to start an orphanage called the Pendergrass Home. So in other words, by undoing the seal, it puts into motion things that must happen by my authority, because it's my will and testament. When the Lamb opens the scroll, it puts into motion things that happen within history. Now, why does he care about this? Because John is thinking about his actual real world occurrences. This is the why. This was pretty cool here to me, Chris. He's explaining why it is when you look around in first century world, why is there pestilence? Where are all these wars coming from? Why is everybody fighting everybody? Why is there a famine over there? Why does it seem like creation is coming unraveled? Where's this chaos coming from? John's answer is the seals have been broken. The shift of the age is about to happen. God is putting into motion the final steps before the end of the world. These are signs that the end of time is coming to an end. It's the sign that the shift of ages has begun. But he's not going to say it like that because that sounds boring. That's prose. He's going to use apocalyptic imagery. So Ralph says, "David, why do you think all these people are fighting each other?" And I said, "It's because God's the shift of the ages, man. It's getting worse. Judgment Day's coming." Well, that'd be a short paragraph. Or I could write a whole book and say it's like this. It's like in the heavenly realms, there's a last will and testament. And one by one, he's putting into motion the end of history. It's like these horsemen. And I'm going to explain that in a second. So it's explaining what they are experiencing, except when he gets to the last seals. Seals like 5, 6, and 7, because those are cosmic. So in John's literal time, that hasn't happened yet. The moon's still there. They don't call it a moon. It's something else. But you see my point. It's still there. So in this time period, are you with me? The first original seals, I don't know what magic number, 1 through 5, that's in his time period. It's the last couple that are bumping up against the edge of the ages. And he knows those haven't happened yet. Now, why do that? It's anticipatory. You're like, dadgummit, we're close. And we're going to see in a second. We'll get there. He's going to seal 6. He gets to seal 7, and he starts all over here. Winds. And now there are 7 trumpets. Trumpet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Trumpets 1 through 4 or 5 are in his time period. It's the last few trumpets that sound a little bit in the future and then farther in the future. And he's saying we're on trumpet like 5 or 6. We're on seal 5 or 6. We're experiencing the things now. And explains why these things are happening within history. Because God is unleashing his last will and testament over the creation.
The opening of a seal to put those events into motion.
It takes the opening of a seal to put it into motion. That's in John's narrative. It does.
Yeah.
Right. That's correct. So literally, is there a seal in heaven? Literally,
No,
I don't think so. Yeah. Right. I think it's.
This is fascinating the way.
I agree. It's fascinating. It's like a last one. Like, what a clever idea. If someone dies, what puts into motion something? And again, it's like that. It's always is like that. So the first seal busts open, and he sees a white horse. And its rider had a bow, and a crown was given to him. Guess what kind of crown? Stephanos crown. He's a victor crown. And he came out conquering and to conquer. But this isn't just conquering the flesh. He's conquering people. This white bowed horseman is like a Parthian. The Parthians defeated the Romans several times. So these are the common boogeymen in the Roman childhood stories. These are the guys who killed the Romans a lot in the battle. And this guy who's out to conquer, he's white. He represents conquest. So people coming to beat up other people, conquest. When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come!" And out came another horse, bright red. Listen to that, out came. So he sees this vision, a red one. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth, so that people should slay one another, and he was given a great sword. That's anarchy. They're killing each other. That's like Leonard's favorite movie, Purge, The Purge. It's like The Purge, yeah, so it's anarchy. I haven't seen that, I haven't seen it. The point is, this is anarchy. So listen to this. Its rider was permitted to take peace. So the image is of a horseman, who has the authority to cause anarchy. There's like a cosmic force behind anarchy. When they opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come." And I looked and beheld a black horse, and its rider had a pair of scales in his hand. Scales. You know, you've seen Lady Justice, or she's blindfolded, she has scales. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the four living creatures, saying, he eavesdrops, he hears something. "A quart of wheat for a denarius, 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and wine." And the God's people said, "Amen." Now, you know what that means? A quart of wheat is about what it takes for a regular adult male to eat a day. A denarius is basically a laborer's day wages. So basically, you work all day for a meal. The next one, 3 quarts of barley, is about what it takes to do a poor person's family. For a denarius, and that's a Roman measurement, is, again, day's wages. So it takes a full day's of wages to pay for your family to eat one meal, or a full day's wages for a person to eat a meal. The point is, it's famine. It's stinking expensive to eat because there's famine. So the black horse represents famine. So we have conquest, then we have anarchy, then we have famine. 7, when he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of a fourth living creature say, "Come!" And behold, a pale horse. Pale. Not white like me, but pale meaning he looks ashen or dead. Maybe I look dead too. And its rider's name was, surprise, surprise, death. I mean, this isn't too apocalyptic here. He's telling you what it means, right? He represents death. And Hades followed behind him. One of the best lines in all of cinema history. Talk to me later. What movie is that? "You tell him hell's following with me." This is movie time, man. Kurt Russell. He thinks they left. He gets the 2 bad guys who want to shoot him and finish off with the train. He comes in and pops it. No, Tombstone. You go back and tell so-and-so, and hell's coming with me. Well, okay, there you go. Well, yeah, man, Tombstone's classic. Speaking of Jesus and Tombstone. Okay, Hades follows, not hell, it's Hades. Hades in Roman lore actually literally is the god of the underworld. I told you before. But it came to represent just the dead, the realm of the dead. But technically Hades is the god of the underworld. So it's death, and Hades, that is the realm of the dead, comes with me. So he represents death, just in general. And they were given, that is all the horses, over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword and with famine and with pestilence by wild beasts of the earth. So this is a bunch of death everywhere. That's the kind of stuff in John's own time that he experienced. Armies conquesting other armies, anarchy, famines,
I bet they wish they didn't know.
death. Yeah, but remember, she said, I bet they wish they didn't open those things. That's right. And I'm convinced, like with Talbert and others, that's why Revelation 4 and 5 is so comforting. Before the throne room, everything's cool. It's going to look like all hell breaking loose, because it is. But it's an unleashing of an order of events on purpose. It's deliberate by God. He knows these things are happening. So when you see famine, it's not because it's all chaos and God's out of control. No, he's still on the throne. This is all part of the cosmic plan. Verse 9, and when he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar of the souls, so listen to the altar, which is right before the throne, the souls of those who have been slain for the word of God and for the witness they had borne. So these are the martyrs. Now, probably we're supposed to understand these are martyrs who just died in that tribulation. and the famine or the anarchy or the whatever, they're given authority. They cried out with a loud voice. So they're there. They're conscious. They're conscious before God himself. They're in a conscious state, in an intermediate state. They're dead. They don't have a body yet. They're disembodied, but they're conscious. And they say, "Oh, sovereign Yahweh." Well, it's just Lord, really. "Oh, sovereign Lord." Maybe Yahweh. Yes, ma'am.
When you use that word tribulation,
Yeah, that's a good question. It's fun. I thought someone was going to ask you about tribulation. Yeah, tribulation. I'm using it. In all fairness, I'm not exactly sure if dispensationalists use it differently than I am now. I mean, it is what the New Testament, just a time of sorrow, suffering, persecution. That's right. That's right. So what dispensationalists mean by that may be something different. But all I know is for a fact, these represent Christians. They're martyrs. So some of these people died because of what was let loose in the cosmos, what was let loose on earth. And verse 10, "O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long before you will judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? When are we going to get payback?" Verse 11, "Then they were each given a white robe and told to rest a little longer until the number of their fellow servants and their brothers should be complete, who were to be killed as they themselves had been." More martyrs are coming. And it's a common Jewish belief that God knew exactly how many people would have to die and live and whatnot before the end has come. That is, it's not a surprise to him. There's nothing surprised. So the fifth seal is just an insight into these souls who are saying, "God, help us, help us, help us." Sixth seal, verse 12, "I looked and behold, there was a great earthquake." Okay, now we're getting big. "And the sun became black as sackcloth." Notice we're getting closer to the seventh seal. We're almost there. "Black as sackcloth, the sun darkened, the full moon became like blood." This is cosmic. "And the stars of the sky fell to the earth, as the fig tree sheds its winter fruit when it is shaken by a gale. The sky vanished like a scroll." Whew, it rolls up like a Bugs Bunny commercial. "That is being rolled up, and every mountain and island removed from its place." Every one, not some, but every. This is cosmic in scale. This affects everything. "Then the kings of the earth, and the great ones, and the generals, and the rich, and the powerful, and everyone, slave and free, hid themselves in the caves of the mountains that were just destroyed," which is, you see how bizarre that is? The mountains were just destroyed. Where are the caves coming from? Remember, this is apocalyptic. It's not literal. "And among the rocks of the mountains, calling to the mountains and rocks, fall on us, hide us from the face of him who is seated on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand?" So it's Judgment Day. Notice now, just repeating myself to make sure this sinks. It's proving what I said. This first few seals were in his experience. Seal 5 were about the altar screaming. Seal 6 is now cosmic. Seal 7 would be new world and new heavens. New heaven, new earth. Brand new. And he wants you to see it yet. So we have in a very, very short, tight, condensed narrative here what it's like. What his answer is. Why is everything like it's going to hell in a handbasket? Oh, because God has unleashed. He's in control. Don't be scared. He's unleashed what he wants to happen. But David, some people are dying because of their faith. Yep. That's in God's plan too. God knows who dies. He knows for their faith. He knows, and they'll be rewarded. They're given purity. They're given the crown of life. They're given they're given a reward for that. If they're pure, if they're conqueror, they'll be fine. Well, David, looks like everything's out of control. He's on his throne. He's on his throne. Is it all judgment and bad? No. It's like a rainbow. It's full of mercy. It's full of mercy. Well, let's see what seventh seal is, because surely it's going to be awesome. And where's the battle? There's no battle here.
Just to give an example of how people use this literally.
Yeah, and the blood moon recently, people mentioned the blood moon. Yeah, John Hagin, otherwise. See, I told you the blood moon. He might be right. The problem is, of course, he was wrong, because here we are yet again. Unless this is a form of hell on earth and I wasn't raptured. Again, to me, in all due respect, it shows the profound nonsense of those kind of interpretations when you look at blood moons. It says, that's what my Bible says. It says in Revelation 6, there's going to be a blood, because they read this like they're reading meteorology. It's going to have a moon of blood, the skies will follow, and on Africa, there's going to be a rainy day, and it's going to be snow in Iceland. This is not meteorology. This isn't a weather pattern. It's apocalyptic, cosmic imagery of the cosmos coming unraveled. Because it's boom, Judgment Day. That's all this is. So I see no reason at all to literally look for the moon. By the way, ancient people didn't know what a moon was. They thought it was a fixed point on a hard firmament that it moved. The sky moves. We don't move. We're stationary. The earth is flat. It's stationary. There's water above the heavens. That's where rain comes from. There's water below the heavens. That's why it floods. And there's no moon. It's not an astral thing. It's a thing and it's a light. And other ancient people thought the stars were gods. And the Jews would say, no, they're angels. So there's no moon. Even in Genesis, now this is a long time ago, not for Jesus, but in Genesis, the moon's not a moon. It emits light. It's light during the day for the sun and light during the night. They think the moon actually glows. This is pre-scientific era. So this is a very different concept. So when it says the moon became blood, it's that white part in the sky of the hard firmament that turns to blood. It's just judgment anyway. Yeah. Chapter 7, what we call chapter 7, which I don't know why in the world this is chapter 7. He's not on the seventh seal yet. It should be chapter 6, Leonard. It's like with chapters 2 and 3 when the 7 churches of Asia Minor. Why did they skip that? That should all be one big long chapter. Chapter 7. After this I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, north, east, south, west, holding back the 4 winds of the earth, the winds of judgment, that no wind might blow on earth or sea or against any tree. So he blocks it. And then I saw another angel ascending from the rising of the sun with the seal of the living God. And he called with a loud voice to the 4 angels who had been given power to harm earth and sea, saying, do not harm the earth or the sea or the trees until we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. And I heard the number of the sealed, 144,000, sealed from every tribe of the sons of Israel. The end. We'll pick up there next week.
Talk about the seal.
Yeah, is the John's point so far as to be encouraged that if you go through you're going to go through bad times, but be encouraged? I think the answer is yes. To say it one more time, I think this is an apocalyptic way of saying something he could have said in prose, real straightforward. He could say, again, I keep picturing, just like we do today, what do you think is going to happen? Why do you think America's going so badly? And there's wars everywhere and rumors of wars, and what's going on? Well, you've heard grandparents say that. Oh, it's going to get worse and worse. I tell you, it's the end of time. Well, that's what Jews did too. And that's what the early Christians did. And that's what apocalyptic authors did. So when they hear wars and rumors of wars, like in Mark 13 and other places, 1 Thessalonians 4, when it gets real bad, it says, this is not chaos for God. It's not chaos for God. God is fully on his throne. He's still in control. The events of human history are a part of a massive divine plan. It's like God had a last will and testament, and he's slowly reading bullet number 1, bullet number 2. And that's why famines happen. That's where all this anarchies happen. It's part of God's plan. What he doesn't say is God caused it. He doesn't lay out the details of God then sent a rebel, God then sent an army. It's just broader than that. Famine, conquest, anarchy, things seem like they're going awful. Instead, what it is a form of tribulation ordained by God. And if you're faithful, if you're a martyr even to the end, you're faithful, you'll be rewarded for it. Now, I'm going to say more about this later on, not today, but just a little footnote. And this is common in Judaism, but Revelation has a similar view. Tribulation, suffering, and pain for non-believers is a form to try to get them repentful, like change their ways, kind of like a spanking. It also can be a form of just punishment in this world. For a believer, it's a testing. Will you conquer, will you give up your faith or not? And that's why very often in the New Testament it says things like, but be vigilant, watch out, watch out, watch out. Don't be surprised, trying to get you aware, spiritually aware. So when that happens, you don't go, okay, I'll give into culture and just give up my faith. You're ready. Oh, when it comes, I knew this was coming. This is my test. So in apocalyptic literature, it's usually one of those two options. This is not the biblical view, it's apocalyptic view. It's the standard where they do it. So if you're a believer, it's a test. Stay faithful, you'll get a robe, get a crown, get a jewel. In Revelation, there's all kinds of prizes. But if you're not a Christian, it's your chance to repent. In Revelation, they usually don't repent. They just constantly fight against God. And it's their way of saying, why are there wars? Why are there famine? Oh, it's part of God's divine plan. It's all part of God's divine plan. And he wants to encourage you by saying, there's a throne. He's still in control. It's glass like that there. He's still the creator. It's all part of a divine judgment. Chapter 7, we're going to see how he wraps up a little bit, and then he comes back, starts all over again. Any other questions about that? Because I do want to stop there. Any other questions or comments about?
So to the reader,
I do think they would have understood the imagery. My gut tells me, Noel, and that's a good question. My gut tells me that the only times, I don't think I've read this in any commentary. Maybe I'm sure people are smart, but I've never read this. I think that the times that they would not have understood the imagery, the only other times that they would not have understood it is when John explains it. I do, because several times John will explain what it means. Remember the 7 lampstands? He says, which are the churches. And the 7 spirits, which is the Spirit of God. And the
So he
songs.
has an insight into when he needs to explain.
I sure think so, Noel. And some people say, oh, because he's inspired by God. Well, maybe. I think he knows, and then maybe, these aren't antithetical ideas I'm having, but I think it's because he knows his audience. I think he knows what images or metaphors they would have gotten, they would have understood, comprehended. And the ones he thinks maybe they wouldn't get this one, I need to explain it to him.
Okay.
It's our problem because all this stuff is stinking weird. I mean, every bit of it's new to us. But to his audience, I'm convinced they would have understood it, or it wouldn't have been encouraging to them. They'd go, what is he talking about? I don't know what John, he's crazy. I don't think they would have done that. I think they understood the images, and the ones they didn't, he explains for them. The lampstands are like the churches. Oh, okay.
Okay, real good.
I sure think so. That's my view. So the answer is yes. I think they fully understood it. Well, I say fully. I think the average person would have had a very good grasp of what he's talking about. Would every person have understood? I don't know, but they would have explained it. Little footnote. Remember Mark 13? Remember Mark 13? Jesus is talking about the end of time. We read this before a few weeks ago. Now it's been a long time. And he said, when you see the desolating sacrilege, in those days, the desolating sacrilege, which is a reference to Daniel, it's what happened when they came in and sacrificed a pig on the altar, and that caused the Maccabean revolt, that kind of stuff. He's saying he uses that image for a future event, which is, of course, something like that happened in AD 70, something like it. Jesus says, when you see that, let the reader understand. Now, let the reader understand is almost certainly not from Jesus. It's from Mark. And Mark is speaking to the reader of the gospel to the congregation. So let the reader understand. Most New Testament interpreters, and I'm one of them, would say that's Mark the evangelist's way of telling the reader of his gospel to the congregation, wink, wink. Remember, that's from Daniel. So when someone asks you, which is what they did, explain it to them. That's why he says, let the reader understand. It's not us. They didn't do it that way. It was a reader to the congregation, to the audience. So I'm convinced, and that was just common. I know it's common because it was commonplace in first century Judaism, and prior to that, when most Jews couldn't speak or read Hebrew, when they read from the Torah, you only read in Hebrew. Then there was someone called a Meturgamon who spoke Aramaic right beside you, who stood there and translated live, like Spanish to English. And when he translated, oftentimes the people could have asked questions. And even in Ezra, we see some of that. When they teach the law, they walk around and help in Ezra. That's exactly right. So it seems to me very likely, and I think most interpreters assume this, when the Gospels were read aloud, maybe even the letters of Paul, that when they read it, they would have asked the reader questions. Now, part of the assumption is because the reader was in the presence of the author when it was given. So when Paul wrote a letter or had someone write it, and he gave it to you, we chatted. We had a conversation. Make sure they get this. Make sure they understand and you can give more details. And I think the Gospels were the same way. So I think John's revelation, we call revelation, I think is a similar thing, though he doesn't know the reader is. It'll be these quote-unquote angels of the churches, which I think are the leaders of the churches who speak it to the people. But since there's no one to interpret for him, he has to put it in the narrative. The lampstands, which means the churches. There's no inside code because he's in prison. He can't meet with a person, and that's more than you asked for.
Yeah, what is this book Revelation about?
So if someone would come up on the street and said, what's this all about? What's Revelation all about? I would say, you must understand in a Christian worldview, which I'm convinced is true, and I can defend that later if you want to have a talk about it, dear friend. But since I'm convinced it's true, a chief component of Christianity is that time as we know it will come to we might call an end chapter. There will come a day when the God who made everything will judge everything. At that time, we're told that before that day happens, things get a little more chaotic. And we experience that now. The wars, the famine, the disasters. is part of creation kind of coming unraveled. Because there's a lot of evil in the world. Revelation attempts to explain why that's happening. Revelation says, John says, what looks like the world coming unraveled and unglued is really all part of God's divine master plan. That he allows the suffering and evil in the world for a time period. Why does he do that? Because those who are on his side have faith in him. It tests their true faith. For those who are not on the side, that suffering is supposed to be like a spanking to change their behavior. He wants to say, stop doing that, like a speeding ticket. It's a small fee, not jail. It's just a small fee before final jail if you don't stop in the end. So Revelation is a way of trying to describe why these events are happening. Because Revelation is trying to tell you that the shift of the ages, the end time judgment day is coming, and it's trying to explain why these events around the world are happening. Secondly, it's trying to give us encouragement that those who stay to the very end will be vindicated. We will be vindicated. Faithfulness to God is rewarded.
That
Is
is
rewarded.
a great explanation.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And that's it. Someone says, why didn't it say it like that? Why don't they say it like that? Because they didn't want to. He could use it a cookbook, maybe. He could have written like a newspaper article. He could use all kinds of stuff. He chose to use one particular genre that's poetic in nature, symbolic. If I had to say why he used that genre, I'd say it's because I bet you money, John thought he had to. Because let me ask you a question. How do you explain being in love?
How do you explain what?
Being in love. How do you explain the best day of your life? The worst day of your life? Do you recount it like an objective editorial reporter? I mean, of course not. Of course you don't. The significant things you would describe by metaphor, because you're trying to evoke something in the other person. And John's convinced the best genre to evoke these people of what I experienced is apocalyptic genre. Well, David, it's so confusing. It is to us. It's a dead genre. And there's images, we don't read much from Daniel these days and Ezekiel these days. But not to them. To them, it was lucid as can be.
They had it in their mind.
Yeah. That's my view. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to A Glimpse of the Kingdom. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you want more, go to davidpendergrass.com. davidpendergrass.com. If you look at the top, you'll see various tabs that have sermons I've preached, a link to all the podcasts I've done so far, a link to my consulting website. For more information about my consulting, see davidpendergrassconsulting.com. Also, you'll see information about the books I've written that are found on amazon.com. So davidpendergrass.com, one-stop shop, all that you need. If you want to reach out to me, follow me on Twitter at Dr. D. Pendergrass, at Dr. D. Pendergrass, and send me a message. I'll see you online.